Good afternoon, everyone. It's brilliant to be here. I'm Ben Wilcox. I'm Peatland Project Officer at RSPB Lake Vyrnwy. First of all, I'm sure many of you have heard of RSPB. I'm sure you've been to one of our 200 reserves. But I'd like to dispel the myth about the RSPB. We don't just care about birds. We care about all types of landscapes and habitats and that restoration and that environmental support. So I work at RSPB Lake Vyrnwy. Lovely picture here. You can see the Victorian-style dam from the 1890s. Large reservoir owned by Severn Trent. Very, very pretty. You can notice the variety of habitats as well. We've got some meadows, we've got some woodlands, but where we've got those snow-capped peaks, that's our uplands. That's where our peatland is. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So this map here is the variety of habitats that we have at RSPB Lake Vyrnwy and the size of the reserve. So you'll notice the size of the football pitch there in the middle, that tiny little green speck. We are working on real landscape scale change, the very big water catchment we're working on here. So as I say, notice the variety of habitats from our meadows. Sort of coming up to our upland edge, we've got freed habitat, and of course we've got our peatlands, we've got our boggy lands. All the dark brown on that map is peatland. That's our deep peat, and that's what we're working with today. So we'll start off with what is peat. So the map on the left there is the peat and peaty soils of the UK. So some of you might be surprised how much peat soil there is. So notice where RSPB Lake Vyrnwy is. So we're in North Mid Wales, sort of on the border, North Powys, on the border of Snowdonia. And there's a lot of peat there in the mountains, in the Welsh mountains there. But also notice the Peak District, the Pennines running up, loads of peat in Scotland. But also notice that some lowland peat as well in the fens and the wash as well. So to understand what I'm talking about today, we need to understand what peat is and how it's formed. So this diagram on the top right is the 4 key things you need for peatland peat to start forming. So you need dense vegetation, you need it to be nutrient poor, you need acidic conditions, but you also need those anoxic conditions. So presence of water is really important for that. So really, you notice there, well, I know Wales is very wet, but you need a lot of water and you need those conditions, and that allows peat to form. With these conditions, things can't break down. So all that vegetation, that dense vegetation, builds up layer on layer. It can't break down. And this is where the animation comes in. So you see we've got the water coming in, that dense vegetation, and layer by layer, if those conditions are met, peat builds up. So it builds about 1 millimetre a year in peat conditions. So majority of the peatlands in the UK started forming at the end of the last ice age, so probably about 10,000–15,000 years ago, and it's taken a long time to get here. So at Vyrnwy, the deepest peat we have is about 4.5 metres deep, but in Scotland, in some places, about 14 metres deep, so quite a lot of it. In the animation as well, you'll notice the carbon that's being locked in that. So all the carbon that makes up that plant material, as I say, cannot break down and is not released. It's stored, it's locked up. So peatlands are really, really precious habitats, really quite fragile, and you need those requirements. As soon as you lose them, you start to break down and you lose the peatland. So the problem is that 80% of our peatland in the UK is in deteriorating condition. So those 4 things you need aren't always happening for a variety of reasons. So peatlands in the UK particularly have seen lots of damage, lots of degradation through a number of reasons, and I'll just cover some of them now. So in the top left, we've got a drainage ditch. In a lot of places in the UK, peatlands have been drained and cut, particularly where we are in Wales, lots of drainage ditches aimed at increasing the stocking, getting livestock on the hill. But as I said before, it's nutrient poor, so you put loads of stock out, there's not much use for it, so it just degrades the habitat. Development is a key issue as well, particularly in Wales. Wind farms are a real issue. As I say, those fragile 4 requirements you need, putting loads of concrete in it and loads of tracks through it is really going to disrupt that and disrupt the water table, which is really important. Afforestation, so particularly conifer crop, again, a real issue in Wales. For peatland, as I say, those roots really damage the ground, and that dries it out. Water is important. There's no surprise then that burning is also an issue, whether it's wildfires or other, dries it out. You get the point. This bottom image here of some very photogenic ponies is an image I took a couple of years ago at Vyrnwy, and it's just to highlight both overgrazing but also undergrazing can be a real issue. So historical poor land management has been a real issue for our peatlands up and down the UK. And finally, I'll mention pollution as well. Not so much an issue in Wales, but particularly Peak District way, where there's a lot of industrial hubs nearby. Peatlands really suffered, and they are in very poor condition. So today I'm just going to focus on what the RSPB Cymru's Lake Vyrnwy Peatland project, what we deal with, and what we sort out. So I'll just go through some of these now. So bear with the jargon. You need to get your thinking caps on. So ditches, I highlighted them before. You can see drying out, water running straight off that hill. Water is really important. I've said before, a wet bog is a happy bog, and with drainage ditches, you lose that. Another feature you might see while you're out walking in the hills are these peat hags. These are basically these bare cliffs of peat. I don't know how well it's showing up on the projector there, but to the left you can almost see some cracking on that left side. That's that peat drying out and all that carbon then being exposed to the air and then being released. So actively you can watch the peatlands eroding away. And finally, what we deal with as well are peat gullies. So these are large, sort of semi-natural runnels off the hill, these gullies off the hill. I've got these two images here. The left one to demonstrate that water running straight off the hill. Where that peatland was once one big flat bog, it's been degraded and eroded out, and now we're left with runnels where the water can literally flow straight through. That second image there is my colleague Stephen, looking very smiley, stood in one of these gullies, just to show you the scale of what we're working on, particularly in Wales. I'm sure you go to other places in the UK, it's far worse than what we have there. Okay, so where I said before 80% of our peatlands are in deteriorating condition, 75% of them are already in poor condition. So not only are they bad, but they're getting worse. Really important to have that intervention. So when in poor conditions, peatlands release greenhouse gases. As I say, all that carbon that's built up over the thousands of years, when it's exposed to air, when it's dry, that gets released. I don't need to tell you why greenhouse gas release is bad. It also exacerbates flooding in winter, but also increases drought in summer. So in a good condition, peatland holds that water on the hill, and it runs off really slowly. So that really helps, obviously, in summer. If the water's released slower, our reservoirs there's less drought, particularly with climate change is going to be an issue. But same with in winter. By having a good condition peatland, that takes the peak off of flood events. So by having them in good condition, it really helps to prevent flooding. And finally as well, it's no longer a stronghold of rare species. Peatlands are very diverse, unique and quite rare habitats because of their degradation in the past. And so those species that call it home are at risk. Now, I've told you all the bad things, but now why should you care? So a fact I love is that peatlands store 25 times the amount of soil carbon than rainforests, so pound for pound. And that's quite a staggering fact because we hear so much in the media about rainforests and how important they are to conserve. Well, actually, we've got something equivalent, if not better, on our back door, and we don't really care about it. Another fact, going back to the flooding and drought effect, 70% of our drinking water comes from peaty areas. So again, it's really important, particularly with climate change, that our peatlands are in good nick to prevent and mitigate against that. And again, finally, host to rare and vulnerable species. So because the habitats are fragile, the species that call them home are fragile as well. So really important. You should all care, basically. But you'll be glad to know we have a solution. Hooray! So what we do at RSPB Lake Vyrnwy, we aim to restore the peatland by restore peat-forming conditions by blocking draining features, so building dams in those ditches, those gullies, and that raises the water level, returning it to where it was before, returning it to the surface before that drainage effect happened, so making it as wet as possible. I'll talk more about that in a second, but before I do, I'll tell you about how we do it. So first of all, we need to find where our peat is. So the map on the left is a heat map of predicted peat depth across the reserve. So other than being a very pretty map, it's really important to highlight the areas that we're working with and the techniques that we're using. So to collect the data, we used very high-tech bamboo canes, and on very soggy days, go out and stick the cane in the ground every 50 meters. So using ArcGIS Pro and using the IDW tool within it, we processed it, generated the heat map, and then it looks nice and pretty. As I say, it really influences where and what techniques we are doing. So now we know where the peat is. Hurrah. Now we need to know where our draining features are. Remember those ditches, those gullies, those hags? I won't shut up about them. We need to find out where they are. So we enact a drone survey and often process that data using ArcGIS Drone to Map. So when we fly that drone survey, we generate both an ortho mosaic, I'll get to that later, and a DSM, a digital surface model. Again, I will get to that later. Really important that we identify these features, as it allows us to apply for grant funding, but also allows us to inform what we're working with, how bad condition is our peatland. So bear with me on this one. This is an area of some unremarkable peatland. So this is the output, that ortho mosaic I was telling you about. So this is that drone survey, flies over, takes a picture, stitches it together. That's what you get. So this is about 500 meters across. So the river meandering at the top there. Bit of peatland, can't see much. This is that same area, but with that DSM, but with the slope generated from that DSM. And as you see, you can start to see some of those gullies, similar size to the one that we were talking about before, start to see some features. When we overlay the two, you get a really clear picture of what we're working with, and you can then digitize and highlight those features. So remember the terminology, our gullies in blue, our hags in red, and our ditches in pink. We're able to identify them using that aerial survey. And it's really important to do that on the scale that we are working on at Vyrnwy. Very, very large area, and without that mapping technology, we would not be able to identify and understand what we need to do. So we know where our peat is, we know where our features are, but how does the bloke in that digger know where he's going? He's currently building a peat dam in a gully. You can see him manipulating the ground and building that dam. But you'll also notice it's quite remote, it's quite bleak, and there's no features. And as well, it's a nice sunny day when my colleague was filming this. A lot of the times, don't I know it, it's blowing a hoolie, it's raining, it's horrible. So how do the contractors know where to go? When I started a couple of years ago, we were still using paper maps and GPSs to find out where these features are. And that was really inefficient, and it caused a lot of grumbling between the contractors. So that led us to develop our bespoke GIS Field Maps app. So you can see we've got the layers that we digitized before using the drone surveys that are active on that map. So not only does it allow us, but it allows our contractors to navigate to where they need to go in these pretty rough, horrible conditions and find what they need to find. It also allows them to place data, so whenever they build one of these dams, we can watch live from the nice warm office that they are actually doing their job, which is nice. Really increases our efficiency. A lot of our income's from grant money for the restoration. And so if we can spend that as efficiently as possible, then we are onto a winner. Now, I've told you who, what, why, now what we've done. So since 2020 is when the Peatland project started in earnest. On the reserve, we have built about 41,000 dams. So you saw the one that that contractor was building. Imagine 40,000 of them. I can't. I know you can't either. But that is equivalent to 4.5 times the number of London buses. So quite a few. We've also, if you stuck those hags, ditches, and gullies end to end, we've blocked about 240 kilometres of those draining features. So that's equivalent from where we're stood right now to Doncaster, whichever way north is, as the crow flies. So a real long area, and that's just on reserve. Gives you an idea of the scale that we're working on. Oh. And finally, we've rewet about 1,000 hectares, so that's about the size of the borough of Southwark. So large areas that we've actively raised the water level back to where it was, blocked those draining features, and returned the water level to where it should be. So I'm sure you're dying to see the results. This is Helver ESAF. This is just one example of one gully system, but you can get a real idea of all those interlocking dams raising that water level. You can see it's across quite a large area. Now you can probably imagine 40,000 of those across the reserve. That digger as well shows you the scale of what we're working on, and that is just one of those features. So finally, I'll show you some before and afters. Those horrible dry ditches, after we restore them, you get these long runnels of dams which raise the water level, block that ditch at intervals. Each one of those pools become habitat for invertebrates, but also the birds. I know I said it's not about birds, but the birds come back. They really like it. They feed on those invertebrates, and it's really, really important. Those peat hags as well that we have, you can see the contractor here who skillfully reprofiled it. So where it was open and it was bare, that peat was exposed. He's just reprofiled it, put the turf back on, patted it down, and it's no longer exposed. So that it's no longer eroding, it's now just stable. And then we've got a before and after for a big gully system similar to the one I showed you in that video. So the image on the left, obviously before, but notice some brown specks on the right side of it. Those are those hags that we're talking about. So really, really key difference. When we build those dams, we've raised that water level back to where it wants to be. And as I say, each one of those pools is habitat. So really, really good. And then 2 years after, just to show you, you've got sphagnum moss, you've got cotton grass coming back, really boggy species where it was dry. You can see there's heather on the sides. You get the boggy species back. It's wetter. It's just better. That gully is now blocked. Yeah, just a very pretty photo. Now, so we've done a lot of restoration, believe me, but the job is never done. There is a lot more restoration to do, both on reserve, but also throughout Wales and throughout the UK. So until then, we will continue our long-term surveys to monitor and determine success. So whether that's through monitoring water table, whether that's monitoring the ecosystem response through species surveys, there's a lot of ways that we and other organisations are trying to prove that it's pretty good to do this. We'll also advocate for policy change. So we've got a couple images of some members of Senedd, so that's the Welsh Parliament, who have come and visited us at Fernwy, highlighting the importance of the work that we're doing and also the success of it. We'll also advocate and advise on peatland restoration across Wales. So in the 5 years that RSPB Lake Fernwy has been doing peatland restoration in earnest, it's kind of become an exemplar site. So to be able to share that with other organisations, but also other landowners outside of reserve, that's the way that we galvanise people to get this restoration work done, both in understanding what they've got on their land, the improvements that could be made, and actually how to access grant funding and how to do the work. So we do a lot of advocating with others and other groups. So all in all, without Esri products, we would not be able to do what we do. Straight up fact. Without the use of drone to map to find the peatland, get it surveyed on the scale that we're working at, without ArcGIS Pro, I use it most days, to identify those features, to digitize it, but then also linking them with field maps. Without field maps, we would be much more inefficient, much less efficient, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do at the scale we do. So thank you to Esri for making it possible. And finally, thank you to our funders as well. RSPB, not only because they pay my wages, but also Havering Dyfrdwy, the subsidiary of Severn Trent, that own the land, but also Natural Resources Wales and the National Peatland Action Programme, real big funders of our work. If you've got any questions, I'm Ben Wilcox. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Rowan, and this is Catherine. And today we're going to give you some more detail on one of those technologies, ArcGIS Field Maps, our solution for viewing, editing, and creating geospatial data whilst out in the field. So we've just heard one fantastic application of this technology with RSPB Cymru. And as you can probably imagine, there are many other ways of taking the data that's stored in your ArcGIS Online or enterprise environments outside of the office and into the field. Carter-Jonas use it to help manage to help inspect their managed properties. Cornwall Council used it to help plan tree planting locations as part of the Forest for Cornwall project. And the National Trust use it in a variety of ways whilst managing their estates. Anywhere that you need your spatial data in the field, whether you're navigating to a point or collecting new information, ArcGIS Field Maps can provide that for you. I mean, nothing helps data accuracy more than being at the location itself. So today we're going to talk you through the process of how to get started with field maps. And to put this into context, we'll be playing the part of a country estate management team that currently use ArcGIS Field Maps to help manage their infrastructure. Picture acres of managed forest and deer park crisscrossed with public rights of way and then crowned in the middle with a large 18th century manor house. Our team manages this for the benefit of nature and the visiting public. So, with the goal of improving management practices, a member of our team has used the web editor and satellite imagery on ArcGIS Online to plot their infrastructure on a map. They've marked out the benches, the fences, and the paths, all to create this rough 2D digital twin. With a little bit of field maps configuration, members of the team can take this map outside and start marking things on the map, but also marking some of these structures as in need of maintenance. Whilst walking around the site with the app, team members can also ground truth the data, meaning they can kind of correct those fence lines that are different in reality to how they were in the remote digitization. So we're going to take you through the next stage of their journey. Staff members have noticed that invasive plant species have started appearing on site and outcompeting the local flora. Unchecked, they may come to dominate parts of the estate, leading to that decline in biodiversity, which is bad for nature, but also for their visitors. As they're already using field maps, they decide to expand on its implementation to help with this issue. And we'll be taking you through the process of creating and configuring that web map, which allows our users to use field maps to collect information about these species. The team at our estate can then use this to inform management. So I'm going to pass over to Catherine, who's going to help you get started.
So I'm going to take you through how to get started in ArcGIS Field Maps. Before we jump into the Field Maps application though, we first must have a feature layer where our data will be stored, as well as a web map to store this feature layer, alongside any data layers which can be used for geographical context. Then I'll take you through how you can configure some basic form elements to show you how you can guide the data collection process. And then I'll touch on offline areas, which can be implemented to ensure that your data is collected even in areas of bad cell reception. So I'll just jump into the first section of our demo. So here we have a web map in ArcGIS Online, and we have a couple layers. So just to introduce you to our feature layer, our main feature layer, which is the invasive species sightings layer. So in this layer are data points that we have collected previously. And just to show you here, you can dig into the points that have been collected in the field, and the information which has been collected pulls through into this pop-up. So you can see here that this was a Japanese knotweed sighting, and also pulling through is a Latin name, which I can go on to show you how we do that, and also whether the individuals have been removed or not. So you can see how crucial data can be pulled through. Also, we've got information about who recorded the sighting, so Rowan did, and also a date stamp and timestamp, alongside any additional comments which were collected in the field as well. So also in this web map, we have some extra layers for context. So we have the Ordnance Survey river sites there, which we pull through from the Living Atlas. So I can select this there as well, and it comes with a pop-up already pre-configured. And later on, Rowan's going to show you how spatial awareness of this river layer comes into the data collection process as well. Also in this web map is an outline of our fictional estate, just for context, which is on the edge of the Lake District. So I'm going to jump into field maps now. And the first decision you've got to make is the web map that you're going to base your field maps application from. So I'm going to select the web map that I was just showing you earlier. So once this loads up, it pulls into the form builder site. And on the right here, we've got our form elements. And you can scroll down and you can see that it also actually pulls through fields. So these fields are pulled through from the feature there that I just showed. And you can actually drag one of these fields, so the species, into your form builder, and you can see how this is starting to build up your form. I can select into this element, and you can see it pulls through the field name from the feature layer, as well as, because we have got a finite list of invasive species that you could come across in the Lake District, we've implemented a list, which is something that you can pull through and can configure in field maps. We've done this earlier. But just to show you that this has happened, I'll click onto and change the input type of this box. So we've got radio buttons here now, and you can see it's pulling through the list of invasive plant species that you could find in this area. And here is a good example of how field maps keeps you right when you're configuring your form, because it comes up with a reminder saying that actually for the user experience, it'd be better to go with the combo box. So I'm going to take this advice and select back onto combo box. Now, something else I'd like to consider is whether this box is, this input is editable, which I'd want it to be, so it's already like that, that's great. And I'm also going to check for it to be required because it is vital to any data analysis we do later on. So I'll save this box now. Now, to think about building up some complexity in our field maps form, I'm going to implement a text box. Now, thinking about the Latin species name that we saw earlier in the pop-up, I'm going to create this here. So if I do Latin species name. So what this does is it pushes in a field into the feature layer that already exists. Now, I'm thinking that remembering all the Latin species for our list of invasive species in the Lake District might be a bit tricky for our mobile workers. So I'm going to do the thinking for them here. So if I then save this box, I'm going to implement some Arcade. Now, for those of you who haven't come across Arcade, it is our lightweight expression language in ArcGIS Online. And we can implement it to automate and pull through the Latin name of the species which they have selected in our drop-down menu. So I'll just flash up this expression that we've built up previously on the screen here. So this is quite a basic expression, and it's a data dictionary. So it is just assigning the Latin name, which we put in for each species, which is in our drop-down menu. So what will happen is that will then be automated and pull through, depending on the species that is selected. And you can see here that when I select and implement the expression that we've got earlier, it automatically implements some logic, because I don't want this element to be edited in the field because it's just going to do all the thinking for them. So that's great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to touch on feature templates. So you might recognize here the symbology from our web map has pulled through into field maps. And this is useful because feature templates in the field, the user can go down, scroll through, and select into, say, specifically giant hogweed. And when they do that, you can pre-package and fill in some of this information so that they can just select on the point and it'll pull through automatically. So I can just click update, and that just shows you that this last one, American skunk cabbage, which is a real species, has pulled through. And you can also reorder these, so you can think about which ones are going to be most common. So again, it's just making the process for our mobile workers as easy and as simple as possible. So now I'm going to touch on offline areas. So here you can see there's a couple of options that we can implement, but just to touch on content. So you can see here that if I open and expand the layers in base map, it's pulling through the layers that we saw on the web map earlier. Now here, field maps will keep you right because there might be a layer that has not been configured to be taken offline. So here it would let you know that, and you can go into the back end and make sure that it can be taken offline. So now just to show you how you can draw a map area. So a map area is a map area that you draw around your fictional estate, which allows this data to be collected, saved, even when you're in areas of bad cell reception. So I'm going to draw one very roughly here, but you could draw one very specific to your study site. And what will happen is the data will be stored, pre-packaged, and then uploaded to ArcGIS Online when you go back into an area of mobile reception. So today I've shown you how to get started in field maps by creating a configured web map, then configuring a data process in ArcGIS Field Maps. But before I pass you back to Rowan, I wanted to highlight another couple things to explore to build up the capabilities of your field maps application. So I have touched on how you can build up complexity in your field maps application using expressions, but you can also build up complexity using a mechanism such as contingent values. So the contingent values, you can implement these in ArcGIS Pro using an ArcGIS Pro basic license. And this basically allows you to create a filtering of the drop-down options using data dependencies. Further, location sharing between mobile workers to improves team coordination in the field. And finally, you can use ArcGIS Field Maps in tandem with one of our other field apps, such as Survey 123. So to see this in action, I will pass back to Rowan to show us what this looks like in the field.
Thanks very much, Catherine. So, now that we've done all that configuration, let's take a look at the app itself. ArcGIS Field Maps can be downloaded from the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store, and once you've logged in using your account details, you'll see all of the web maps that are accessible to your account. To enter the offline version of one of these maps, I would just simply tap it, but I can also tap the 3 dots here and to download one of those offline areas or set up a new one. But remember, this is only possible if you've configured your web map and your layers correctly, as Catherine was describing. So we'll tap in, and now we can start looking at some of that functionality that's been set up for us. But this is where most of your team might jump in. Only one person needs to configure the web map and all the layers and forms correctly, and then share it appropriately for everyone else to benefit from to benefit from it. So we can navigate the map in the same way that you would navigate other maps with a touchscreen. By tapping and dragging across, I can pan the map, but I can also pinch to zoom in and see more detail. We can also see across the top there are a number of other useful tools for us. So we can open the layers list to quickly and easily. Oh, apologies, I've just tapped that. We'll have to zoom back into our study site. There we go. But we can turn on and off different layers, as well as enable a filter if this has been configured in Field Maps. We've got the search tool. If you know the name of a place or even the coordinates, you can quickly jump to a location. And under the 3 dots, we've got a plethora of other tools, which unfortunately we don't have time to go into right now. Some good ones, the measure tool is really useful out in the field. Bookmarks will help you jump to a place even if you don't know the name. And the base map switcher is always useful to get extra contextual information. So now let's imagine that we are out on site and we've just seen one of those invasive species that we're interested in, such as Himalayan balsam. To add a new record in any of our layers that we've configured, we press the blue plus button in the bottom right. Then we'll be met with a list of all of those templates that Catherine was talking about, and we can search for the one that we're interested in. But as you probably saw there, I've run this demo before, and my previously selected templates will be available at the top of the list for convenience. So if we tap that, we'll be brought to the data editing screen. We can pan around with this crosshair, and once we're happy that the crosshair is over the correct position where the Himalayan balsam example is in reality, we can press the Add Point button to drop a point onto the map. If we scroll down, we'll see the form that's associated with this record. And as we can see, because we selected the correct template, Himalayan balsam has automatically been filled out. We can also see that the scientific name has been filled out as well, based on the ArcGIS arcade code that Catherine showed earlier. If we scroll down here, we'll see there's a block of text asking us if we're sure about this location. The species Himalayan balsam is commonly associated with waterways, and this message has been configured to show when a record describing this species is placed more than 100 meters from a waterway. This conditional visibility has also been set up with ArcGIS Arcade script, and also pulling in that waterways data set that we derived from the Living Atlas. When I see this warning, I might double check my species ID to make sure that I've got the correct species, or I might realize that I've put my point in the wrong location and that I need to move it. In this scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the crosshair and I'm going to replace my point closer to the waterway. And by doing this, what I'm doing is I'm triggering that arcade to rerun and recheck the new location. As we can see, now that the point is within 100 meters from a waterway, that message has disappeared. When you understand that this scripting logic can be applied to groups of questions as well as other questions, you can start to think about how you can be guided through a process of filling out a form and always collecting information. On top of that, we can also start to apply arcade logic to automatically fill out questions, as we've seen, but also to make questions mandatory and required. So, when I'm happy with my record, I can press the Submit button in the top right, which will save it. And anyone viewing this dataset online will also view this new record that I've entered. If I'm working offline, I'll have to sync this dataset with ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise before it appears on other devices. As I'm sure you're starting to imagine, there's a lot more that we can do with ArcGIS Field Maps. But as this has met our initial requirements, it brings us to the end of the demo. So, what's next for the Field Maps tool? What are some of those additional functionalities that we can add to it? Well, ArcGIS Field Maps comes with a geofencing feature, which allows us to trigger certain actions when someone goes within a specific area. And this is commonly used to let users know when they're entering a certain part of site, but what we can do is we can use it to let people know when they're getting close to one of the more dangerous invasive species, giant hogweed. We can kind of customize the distance at which they receive this notification. We can customize the distance at which they see this notification. And when someone enters in a new record, the geofence will automatically update.
How about location sharing? Can our mobile workers choose to share their location if they want their route to be recorded? With this capability, users can see where they've been visiting on a site. This could be used, for example, to identify unsurveyed areas where invasive plants may be present. Once permitted by the mobile worker, the admin can enable tracking on a specific map.
And don't forget that your data doesn't just exist within Field Maps. You can take this data outside into other apps in ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, or beyond. I could make an ArcGIS Instant app or a dashboard to share this data with some of my other colleagues, where we can start analyzing trends and hotspots in the invasive species. Using the mobile view in dashboards, I can ensure that the information is just as informative on any device.
So today we have shown you an example of how ArcGIS Field Maps can revolutionize the field data collection process and management. On a variety of projects, from conservation efforts to property inspection, Field Maps is an application being used every day in data collection processes. Thank you for joining us. We hope you can see the potential of Field Maps in your future workflows.